Hello guys and welcome back to the Sunday Studios YouTube channel. In today's video we're going to be picking up where we left off with our Sci-Fi Knife model, and we're going to quickly finish up the blade, do the last finishing touches, add a bevel to this so it's done, we can park that, and then move on to the handle. We're going to tackle some of the shapes in this. This is quite a detailed model, so I'm going to show you how to add various different shapes like these flat sections here on an otherwise rounded handle, how to add little cuts like this and this. We won't show you how to make absolutely every single detail on this, because once you know how to make, this one and this one, for example, you'll know how to do the rest, because they're all basically the same in principle, and just for time sake as well. Otherwise this video is going to be very, very long. So let's get right into it. So this is where we left off our blade last time. We've got a nice smooth twisting shape with some nice even and clean topology. Last few things we need to do before we finish up here is I'm going to go to the modeling toolkit and grab the multi-cut tool, and I'm just going to drag directly across by holding down left click. We're then going to go into the edge selection mode, select this entire edge here, and I'm going to change the transforms constraint to edge slide. And the reason I'm going to do this is because if I move this now, it slides up and down. If I was to turn this off, you can see here it's adjusting the shape of the knife, and we don't want that to happen. We want this to specifically just slide, because we're going to use this as a holding edge. And right now it's not flat. If we want to make it flat, just use the scale tool, scale down in Y, and that will flatten that off. I'm just going to pull that down a bit. The reason we're adding this is because once we smooth this, we want to have another edge here to hold this so that the shape is maintained a little, right? You'll see what I mean in a minute once we actually add bevels to this. We can then go ahead and turn transform constraints off. That's very handy when you need to do things like this. I use it all the time. And what we're going to do now is stay in edge select mode, and we're going to select all the edges we need to make hard, to add holding edges, so that when we bevel this, or when we subdivide this, sorry, those edges are held. If we want to do a high poly, or we want to just do a nice render, depending on what you'd use this for, holding edges like this are important. Otherwise the model will just look mushy like this, and that's not going to be a very good knife, is it? You won't be cutting much with that. It'll be more like some sort of like bludgeon. So we're going to select all of these main edges that create the cutting edge. We do want to deselect some of these though, like these. We don't want this going down here, because if we bevel these edges, it's going to disrupt this circular shape at the bottom, and we want to keep that, okay? And then we're going to select the edges that make up these fullers, these grooves. Get the internal ones as well. You need to do a bit of extra selection on these, because I'm double clicking here, by the way, to select this entire edge loop, if you didn't know. And with shapes like this, sometimes you have to select more of the edge. It won't just select the whole loop. Maya's a bit quirky in that way. Down here as well, there are tools to do this in more modern versions of Maya. If you want to, they can select them automatically, but this is just how you would do it manually. We're going to select this bottom edge here as well. And then we're just going to select this edge too. And then that should be every single edge that we want to bevel. The last thing just to do is literally just go ahead and hit bevel in the modeling toolkit. And you can see that's gone ahead and added some new edges along the ones that we selected. But what we're going to want to do here is turn chamfer off. By doing that, that creates a nice holding edge here. Instead of creating a new face, right? I mean, this is creating new faces because it's adding new edges, but it's, instead of creating a chamfered edge like it was before, it's just adding holding edges, right? So if I go ahead and press smooth, free on my keyboard to smooth preview that now, you can see it's looking nice and sharp. It's maintaining those details, and nothing looks particularly out of place. One thing to pay attention to when you're beveling in this way is how far these edges are away from the edge. A lot of edges in there, I know, but it's important, and we can adjust that by adjusting the fraction. If I was to make this too big, you can see this no longer looks particularly sharp, but if I was to make it really too small, this almost looks too hard and CG, right? Like this is probably way too sharp. And yes, in real life you'd want it to be really, really sharp, but the thing is with 3D renders is you want the light to be able to catch this edge. So there's some artistic license that you can take here. So I think something probably more like this. Now if I go ahead and smooth preview this, you can see we're now getting what looks like a nice sharp edge, and this is looking nice and smooth. You can see as well why I added this edge, because this is smoothing over a little bit nicer than it was. If I was to go ahead and remove this, it kind of looks a bit crusty, a bit lumpy, a bit jaggedy. And it's probably still not enough there, to be honest. So what I would do is go ahead and grab the multi-cut tool again, add another edge in the middle, and then just use the scale tool to scale that out a little bit maybe. And then the same with this one, just to add a bit more of a curve to this. Now if I smooth that, that's looking a bit better. We've got some issues. Sometimes the bevel tool in Maya plays up a little bit. As you can see here on the corners, it doesn't work very well in some areas, so we have to do some manual cleanup. You can thank Autodesk for that one. If I just press 4 on my keyboard, you can see that we can see the wireframe of this, and you can see all the vertices that we don't want overlapping, kind of like what we went over in the first part. So I'm literally just going to select those, come up to edit mesh, and then I'm going to go to merge to center, and that's going to sort of average those out and merge those into one point. Now that's looking nice and smooth for us. Okay, just give our model a once over to see if there's any more of these. I'm going to press G on my keyboard to repeat the previous action, and that's going to also merge those to center. And again, like I mentioned last time, pressing 3 on your keyboard is a great way just to do the sanity check, because it kind of smooths everything out. You can see the individual vertices more, and you can see what's working and what isn't. You can see here there's a bit of funniness as well. This is a quirk that I think's been in Maya forever. Okay, ultimately you can't see it. It doesn't make any issues on the mesh, but it's just a topology doing this weird thing. To fix this, just delete one of the faces, select all the edges, and then just come back to mesh and fill hole. Then that will fix it. I would encourage you to fix stuff like that. Annoyingly, that bug has been in Maya forever. It doesn't seem to have any signs of going away. You can see here we've got some extra vertices as well that we don't want. So we're going to go ahead and merge those again. Merge the center. Again here as well. Oh, it's got quite a few ones there. And we're just going to have a quick flip round and then look for anything that might have gone wrong. Some more here. Generally, because this is sort of like a triangle shape, you're going to have the same problems repeating on different sides, so you're going to know what to look for. Another quirk of doing bevels is that you'll get problems like this, where it's created a n-gon. You'll particularly get it in the corners. It will either resolve like this, where you've got a kind of clean separation, and we can fix this just by grabbing the multi-cut tool, connecting to this edge and connecting to that edge. Then that's creating a nice quad that resolves nicely for us. So we'll quickly fix those up. The other way that this can go wrong is that sometimes you'll get a situation like this, and that's not necessarily the end of the world, but it just kind of resolves a little bit ugly. I don't really like it. I think the topology could be better. So what I generally like to do in this case is fix this. I'll go ahead and delete these edges. Grab the multi-cut tool again, and then have it come out more like this. So it looks a bit more similar to these ones. And then what I might do is just have these edges come out like this. And that is creating some triangles, but you know what? That is entirely okay. Reason being is this isn't going to deform. It's a hard metal object, and this is a flat surface. And realistically, at render time, your computer assumes everything's a triangle anyway. So to anyone that's a triangle or a quad purist, you don't have to be. You're just making your life harder for yourself. So we can go ahead and just fix this up nice and easy. We could, in fact, if you really don't want any triangles, fix this up in a different way. You could delete this edge here. Delete these here. Have that come out like this and then like this, but then you'd have to fix this overlapping vertice. And it just gets a bit messy. So occasionally triangles are okay. If you want to completely avoid them, sure, go for it, but I don't think it's 100% necessary. And this is now resolving a bit better. So we'll just fix up this last one. And then delete these extra edges. Because that is where we don't want triangles, in this section here. We want quads to be here. So it's about knowing when and when not to have triangles. So this is now looking super clean, nice and smooth. Okay, again, I'm pressing 3 on the keyboard to preview this. Or, never mind, spoke too soon. This is why we do one last final check. There's a few more little guys. And again, it's just going to be in corners like this. And it's probably repeated itself across the mesh, unless it was just one I missed. Nope, that's looking good. So there we go. That's a nice clean mesh, and we can go ahead and move on to the handle. So what I'm going to do is just raise this up to give us space to build that handle out. And I'm going to start with this top section up here, kind of like the guard, if you like. So to do that, I'm literally just going to go ahead and create another cylinder, pull that up and scale it up so it's just bigger than the base of the blade. Something like this, and have that sit just there. Okay, and then something I like to do as well is change the number of the subdivision axes to something like a bit lower generally. 20 is okay, that's what is normally created by default. Sometimes I'll set it to 16. The main thing is, though, you want the subdivision axes to be divisible by 4, just because it makes for a cleaner model. So we'll stick with 20 for the time being, since we're going to need some more polys for this anyway. And I'm not worried about this having a different number of divisions to the base. Not worried at all about that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. So that's going to form the base of our guard. And the way I like to work here, just like we did with the blade, is just to keep things simple. Okay? Don't worry about making things too overly complicated. Keep things nice and simple and blocked in to begin with. Because that way it's just going to be easier for you to work with. And also, when you see things like this, if something looks like it's made of a separate material, you generally want to build it entirely separately. Good rule of thumb is if it would be built a certain way in real life, you want to build it that way in 3D as well. Within reason, obviously. Sometimes there's a time to break that rule. So I'm going to pull that down. And then this looks like it's all one piece. So I'm just going to select all of these faces. And then we're going to go ahead and extrude. Increase the offset a bit. And have this come straight down. Then back out again. Have that come out again. If you're wondering, I was using the scale tool instead of the offset for the extrude. It's just something I prefer to do to give me more control. You can do it either way. It achieves the same thing. It's just sort of a habit of mine. And then we'll have this come down like that. Okay, so this is sort of that part there, right? And then this part here sort of looks like a separate material. It kind of looks like a rubber, like a soft sort of grip material, right? So we'll create a whole new cylinder for that instead of using the one that we've already done. So we'll just go ahead, go back to the poly modeling shelf, create a new cylinder. Again, 20 divisions is going to be fine. We'll scale that up. So that's it, it's just outside of this size-wise. Okay, then I'm going to grab the vertex selection mode from the modeling toolkit, and I'm just going to pull this down for the entire length of the handle. Okay. Something like this, maybe. Okay, and the reason why I'm doing the entire length is because even though it looks like a separate piece, generally, if something is the same material, or even as a separate material, because we have this kind of groove here, this flat surface that's running down, it's going to be a lot easier for us to build this as one piece and separate it afterwards than it would be to make these two pieces independently and then try to get them to line up. So wherever you can, build things as one piece if it makes sense to. A lot of knowing when to do that and when not to do that will just come from experience. But with slightly more complicated shapes like this, build it as one piece, separate it afterwards, and that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and do. Okay, so before we go ahead and start adding in details like this little cut here and this flat surface here, we actually want to add some more divisions to this, because right now it's a little simple. If we were just having a straight cylinder with some like maybe extrusions in the middle, like grooves, that would be fine. But because there's some more detail to this, we're going to need some more divisions. And you might be thinking, why do we need to subdivide this? And the reason being is because yes, you need to work low poly to begin with, but once you start cutting in details like this, you need to actually subdivide, especially on rounded surfaces. If you think, if we were to draw the edges onto here that we'd have to make, you know, you'd have some loops going around here along the cylinder, but you think here, we then have this kind of rounded edge. How is then that going to connect up as quads? Well, you're probably going to have some edges coming off this way, you know, in a direction which is against the flow of the topology. And if we kept this really low poly, you know, let's say I just, for the sake of example, started adding some straight edges going across here, and then I smooth this. Of course, it's not going to do it straight away, but you can see here we're getting a very, very faint little kind of bobble there. And it might be even more noticeable if I go ahead and create the kind of shape that we'd need, like this, and then connect it up like that. It might be hard to notice on the screen on YouTube, but you can see we're getting a crease, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So in order to mitigate that, we're literally just going to throw more polygons at it, within reason, obviously. You can definitely do too many. So in order to get this to have a higher subdivision count, if you've lost the shape node underneath here that allows you to add more divisions, don't worry. If you do have this shape node still, you can go ahead and adjust them in there. But if you don't, just like we did with the blade, I'm going to select the top and bottom edges here. Okay. I'm going to come up to Mesh Tools and go to the Crease tool, hold down middle mouse and just drag to the right. Now if I smooth this, you can see it holds its shape. So we can just go ahead and do a smooth to subdivide that. Okay, and this will probably be enough quads for us, enough polys for us to create this flat section. We might need some more for this part later, but for the time being, we'll work with what we have. We want to do this incrementally and kind of carefully, right? There's no rush. We can take our time with this and figure things out. A lot of modeling is kind of problem solving. Also, if your model after subdividing looks a bit weird like this, just select those edges that are supposed to be hard like this. Come up to Mesh Display and click Harden Edge. That'll just fix that up. And we don't need those creases anymore, so I'm just going to grab the crease tool again, hold down middle mouse, drag to the left this time. We also don't need this edge in the middle, so I'm going to select all of that, press Control and Delete, so it gets rid of the vertices too. And now we have our shape to work into. So we could just start like cutting into this willy-nilly and make some of these surfaces flat with the scale tool, but that's not exactly the best way to do this if we want a nice clean result. Instead, I'm going to create a cylinder, and we're going to use this cylinder as a guide for the shape of our flat section. And I'm going to reduce the number of subdivisions on this to 8. Okay, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. If you hold J on your keyboard, that will just angle snap. You can also just type in 90 in the channel box too, that'll work. And we're going to scale this up to kind of how big that flat section should be. If you take a look at your reference, to me, it looks maybe something kind of like this. I like to view the topology at the same time, so I might press this little blue button up here. And what this allows me to do is kind of see how this is going to interact with our topology and just make sure that we have enough edges here. And I want this to fit within some of these lines, okay? Because we're going to be making some edits. You can see we probably don't have enough polys for this to work, so I might increase this to 16. That's maybe too much. What I'm looking for is to have enough edges to match the edge count of our subdivided cylinder. So we'll just experiment with that for a minute until we get the right amount. 16 seems to roughly be the right amount. So I'm happy with that. What I'll then do is go ahead and duplicate this and then bring this down as far as we need it to. You can see it goes down most of the way of the handle here. So I'm going to bring it down to around about here. Then I'm going to go ahead and combine these two, come to Mesh and Combine. I'm then going to delete some of these faces. Okay, and again, this is just making a guide for us to work with. Select these edges. Then we're going to go ahead and bridge those under Edit Mesh. Okay, and then this is going to form the guide shape for us. Right, so we can kind of literally trace around this. Another little trick you can do is to make your life easier. Instead of having to do this on both sides, we can actually go ahead and just delete one side of our mesh. Like so. So we only have to do this once. And then we can duplicate it across. In fact, because we probably want this on both sides, we can go ahead and delete this side too. And then literally we just have to make 1/4, and this will save us having to clean this up, 4 times. Instead, we'll just have to do it once. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and grab the multi-cut tool. And to begin with, I'm just going to put in some kind of protective edges to give us our region where we're going to be working in. Like this. Okay, once we have those protective edges in, I'm going to go ahead and grab the multi-cut tool again. And we're just going to kind of start cutting in the shape here, using this as a guide. I'm not worried if it's not exact, but just following the flow up to something like this. Then we'll do the same on the bottom. Okay. And once that's done, we can literally just go ahead and delete this. You don't have to create the guide shape, but it's something I like to do just to give me a point of reference. And then going to grab the multi-cut tool again and just connect these edges up to do a preemptive fix. Okay. And then we'll also have this come straight across. Maybe adding an edge underneath like this. Okay, and then I'll probably just go ahead and flatten this out. So I'll select that whole edge, make it flat like this. Just scaling down in Y. We can probably take these vertices up here as well, actually, to be level. Because I'm thinking this might be a little bit too wide, actually. We probably want this flat part to start on this face. Again, this is why we take things nice and slow. Just flatten that off. Okay, and then probably bring these edges down a bit. Just to make sure we've got kind of more even quads on either side. Okay, then I'm going to go into face select mode and I'm going to select these faces here. Okay, and I'm going to press D on my keyboard. Now this is going to let me change the pivot point. You can also double click the move tool and do that from here as well. If you click edit pivot, hold down V on your keyboard so it snaps to the vertices, and I want it to snap to this corner here. Okay, then I'm going to press R to use the scale key, and I'm just going to scale this down this way in Y, and that's going to flatten that off for us. So that's gone ahead and created that flat section that we needed. Okay, and we're probably going to want to subdivide this again. So what I'm going to do is we're going to Control D to duplicate this, and I'm just going to do a minus scale in the X, okay, to give us the mirror of that. And then I'm going to come up to Mesh and Combine to merge these two together, and then go to Edit Mesh and Merge to make sure none of the vertices are sitting on top of each other. And then I am going to select all the edges that we want to keep hard. Again, because we're going to be subdividing, we want to make sure these are kept solid and not smoothed. So we want these to all have hard edges. This top and bottom section to also have hard edges. So if I go ahead and smooth that now, you can see we have that cut in that we needed. Okay, and then we'll set the pivot point again to the middle, duplicate this to go to the other side, and then do the exact same thing, mesh, combine, then edit mesh and merge. Okay, so now we have that nice shape that we needed with those flat sections with nice even topology, but we're going to subdivide it just one more time. Like this. Okay, and this is getting a bit crazy on top, but don't worry about that. And then we'll just get rid of these creases again. In fact, you can just select all the edges and get rid of the creases like this. Oh, make sure not to crease everything. Okay, so that is our model. It's looking very, very dense now, and maybe we can go ahead and clean up some of these edges in a bit, but for right now, this is okay. We're now going to go ahead and cut in this detail here. So that looks to me like it's kind of just off from this flat section. So we're going to go ahead and use face select mode to select the faces that we want to extrude in, but there's a bit of a notch here at the top. If we look at the reference, it comes in a little. So we can see that needs to come up to about here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm pressing Control 1 on my keyboard, by the way, to isolate this, so we can just do that once at a time. And if you press Control 1 again, it unisolates. So I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to add an extra edge in here. And then we're just going to delete the faces that we don't, or we're going to extrude the faces that we want to push in. So I'm going to go ahead, go to extrude, and then just increase the thickness, or decrease the thickness, I guess, into the minus to something like this. So that's created our notch, but then of course we want to keep this with some nice hard edges. So using the multi-cut tool, I'm going to add just a protective edge here and here to make sure there's quads around this, maybe up here as well. Okay, then we're going to select all the edges that we want to keep hard here. Might as well do this whole top one as well. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and just bevel those. Okay, again, turning chamfer off. And then let's increase the fraction a bit, up to something like this. Now, if I go ahead and smooth this, you can see how we're getting basically minimal to no or none of that like pinching that we were getting earlier. We're getting a tiny little bit in the corners, but sometimes that's kind of unavoidable, especially on shapes like this. So this is kind of the best way to do that. You just need to make sure you have enough topology to support this kind of shape. And then we can resolve these corners just by doing this. Okay, same goes for up here. Okay, if you're getting some weirdness here where the vertices are kind of overlapping, we can probably just merge these down into a single point since they're so close together. Okay, and then that's created that nice shape for us. All we need to do now is go ahead and just select these edges. Seems like it's going to try and select some that we don't want. Okay, if that happens, you just have to deselect these edges. This is the annoying quirk of Maya where it just selects the edge loops. If I hold down Shift on here and then double click on here, it's just going to select that one ring for us. We'll do the same on the other side. Again, feel free to split this into halves and reduplicate it across afterwards if you'd rather do it that way. Then we're going to go ahead and just bevel this. Again, turning chamfer off. And I think I'm going to leave the bevel at this width because I want this to look a bit softer. Now if I smooth that, you can see we're getting this nice flat section there, and we're not really getting any weirdness, and the topology is relatively clean. We probably don't need these edges in the middle. Maybe we can keep that one. We probably don't need this middle one right now. So, or we could even repurpose this because we're going to need to split this, remember? And thinking about it, we probably should split this before doing the bevel. Got a bit ahead of myself there. So we're going to go ahead and repurpose this edge, and we're just going to pull that up to roughly where the split should be, which to my eye looks around about here, something like that. Then we're just going to come up to Edit Mesh and click on Detach. That's going to separate those two pieces. If I go into Face Selection mode now and double click to select this whole top piece, you can see it's just selected those. Then we can come back to Edit Mesh and go to Extract, and that's going to separate this piece out for us. So now that's one bit, and we can just pull that off like so. But obviously we now need to add this bevel here. So I'm literally just going to Control-1 this to isolate it, select this whole bottom edge, come up to Mesh, and then go to Fill Hole. And we'll do the same here. Just press G to repeat that action. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bevel this whole thing, right? Because we need to create this kind of edge here that comes in like this. I'm just going to bevel that. Maybe reduce the fraction a little bit to something like this. And remember this number here, 0.37. We could even copy and paste that. And then we're going to do the same on this one. Bevel. And we're going to paste that. Okay? So now that creates that nice cut for us. Just to quickly undo this. If your edges aren't selected by default like this, and you have nothing, you might be trying to double click this and it's not selecting anything. That's because this is a massive n-gon. Maya doesn't recognize it as an individual edge loop. To fix that and select all these edges very quickly, just come to Face Select mode, hold down Control and right click, go to Edges, and then go to Edge Perimeter, and then I'll select the whole thing for you without having to do it manually. Then we can just go ahead and bevel and then paste that in the fraction that we needed. Okay, so you can see how creating this as two separate pieces has actually made our lives a hell of a lot, or as one single piece, it's made our lives a lot easier because it means we could add this flat shape, and now the topology is nice and consistent, and it all lines up. We can then go ahead and fix this if we wanted to keep things nice and even. Or keep the topology nice and clean. You don't necessarily have to do because it's a flat face, but you probably should, especially if you want to use this for a portfolio piece. Although we're not really seeing that face, so it could be okay. It's up to you. We can now go ahead and bevel these edges that we wanted to from earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do that face selection trick I told you about earlier. Go to Edge Perimeter. Then we're just going to select all of these edges that we need to. Okay, like so. And I probably would bring this all the way down to here, just so that connects up. Then we can go ahead and bevel this. Select chamfer to off. And then we can just repeat these same steps for this part here. Again, using that face select to quickly select those edges. And repeating the same section. A lot of what makes this work is just planning, okay? It's knowing what you're going to need, the edges that you're going to need, and knowing where everything needs to be before you start cutting things in. I'm going to press wireframe on shader just to make sure that this bevel is the same width, and it looks like it is. So now if I go ahead and smooth preview this, you can see we're getting this nice shape. We've got that cut in that we wanted. We've got this cut in that we wanted. And yeah, there you go. That's starting to take shape. And we've got some of the nice detail in there as well. We can apply the same principles that we used for this part up here to keep this nice and clean for up here as well. You can see we need to do these extrusions, and at a low poly, we'd also have similar issues if I was to just, you know, extrude this in and out like this. That could work, but if we were to subdivide this or add bevels to this, it's going to look a bit funny. We're probably going to get some of that pinching, those artifacts we were talking about earlier. So we can go ahead and adjust the subdivision axes of this because I still have it. But what might happen is, if you've used the vertex selection mode to adjust the height of something, Maya freaks out and you can no longer adjust the subdivision axes, otherwise it does that. So we have to do our trick that we did with the crease tool. Crease those edges and then go ahead and smooth this whole shape. If you had a bit more foresight, you could instead go ahead and already know that you need a certain number of edges to make this work. So I'm going to subdivide this up to the same level as this part of the handle. Let's get rid of the crease tool now, as we don't need it. Okay, I'm going to delete some of these edge loops because we don't need them. Okay, and now we want to add an equal number of faces sticking out. Okay, so if we look at our reference, you can see here it's kind of coming out at 45-degree increments. Or 90-degree increments, I suppose. So the simplest way to do that is we're just going to select some faces here. Then we're going to come to this side of the grid, select another 4. And I'm using the grid here as a guide to know which faces to select. Okay, like so. Then once we've done that, we can just go to the modeling toolkit, go to extrude. Then we're going to just change the thickness to pull this straight out. Something like this. If they're coming out at an angle like this, and you don't want that to happen, you want them to come straight out, simply just select the vertex selection tool. Select all of these. Okay, you can see this is also curved. We don't really want that to be. Use the scale tool and just scale against the direction. So I'm scaling to the right, so in the Z-axis here to flatten this off. I can then go ahead and select these vertices, use the move tool and hold down V again, if you remember, to vertex snap to this part here. Okay, and now we have those coming out straight, like that. Okay, and then you could very, very easily bevel this because it's not, you know, extruding from within these faces. So what if instead of doing it that way, we actually wanted to have it extrude out from within, so it's kind of scaling down and coming out a little bit further down. So we'll use the multi-cut tool, hold down Control and middle mouse, click to add one in the middle, and then we'll just bevel this so that we have an even distribution. And we'll leave a gap or something like this, and then we'll go ahead and reselect those faces again. We'll do 4 on each side. Okay, and this is where the extra topology or the extra mesh density is going to help us. If we now extrude this out, it would get a little bit more complicated because we're going to need edges going off in this direction, right? We think we're going to have intersections here. We're going to need an edge to come off here to resolve that n-gon. So if I go ahead and just select all the edges that we need to bevel here. Okay, once they're all selected, we don't need these ones going across. If I just go ahead and bevel that, turn the chamfer off. Okay, maybe reduce this a little bit. You can see this is working, but we have some edges to resolve here. So we're just going to go ahead and use the multi-cut tool to connect these up. Now, if I smooth preview that, you can see that pinching, that weird artifacting in the corner is significantly reduced to the point of being almost imperceptible. But if we had way less polys here, we wouldn't be able to do that. So you could go ahead and just clean that up in the same way for the rest. And this is kind of really all you need to know to do the rest of these details. So I've taught you how to do this cut in here, how to do this flat section, how to extrude this out. And a lot of it really is just basic modeling tools. Like bevel and extrude and things like that, but just knowing when to subdivide, when to keep things low poly and when to keep things high poly, and knowing where to place edges. So if you can figure out how to do these three things that I've just shown you how to do in the video, you can go ahead and finish the rest of the knife. And that's taken you most of the way there. So what I would say now is, using what you've learned in this video, go away and see about how you can add this pommel part down here, this little intersection, this raised part here. It's all exactly the same tools that you've been using. Just remember to keep in mind, keep it low until you have to subdivide. You can use the creasing trick to add subdivisions when you need to. Or if you already know that it's going to need more detail, make it higher poly to begin with. If you can, make something as a combined piece, then separate it afterwards like we did here, because it just makes your life a lot easier. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to let me know. Always happy to answer those. Any suggestions as well. So yeah, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.